Welcome to Dying to Know, where we open up about everything that comes with losing a loved one.
Because the only thing that's worse than death is not being able to talk about it.
We're your Bereavement Babes, Leah and Rachel, and today we're talking about ambiguous grief.
Ambiguous grief. I'm very ready for you to help me completely understand ambiguous grief. This one was a hard one for me.
Yeah, high key, I'm really excited.
I'm glad you are. I did do like a 180, 360, whatever it is, to like start getting to know it better. So I hope I can match. But I'm excited for your insights on it.
Yeah, I think when we were like planning like the arc of the season, how we said we were gonna start with like stages of grief, and we took a time to like deep dive, and then now this is kind of where like the season turns.
Yes.
And we're talking about a different type of grief, which I think is super relatable, and like everyone can like get a better understanding of it. So starting as always with some definitions here, and I have plenty, so I'll go slow. So ambiguous grief, I was able to find 3 definitions that I thought were really helpful. So the first one is from the Mayo Clinic. It is a person's profound sense of loss and sadness that is not associated with a death of a loved one. Example, jobs, relationships, and opportunities, which I feel like we've brought up at some point before here. Also, a second definition, which came from Wikipedia, was ambiguous loss is a loss that occurs without a significant likelihood of reaching emotional closure or a clear understanding. This kind of loss leaves a person searching for answers and thus complicates and delays the process of grieving, and often results in unresolved grief. And I felt like when I heard this one, I was thinking of like being ghosted, like in relationships.
Okay.
And third but not least, I got this one, from Psych.com.
Okay.
Psych.com, I guess. So in the 1970s, a researcher, Pauline Boss, PhD, came up with the term ambiguous loss to describe grief that has no definite boundary or closure. The common thread is a lack of clarity about the nature of loss and uncertainty about it, how or if or when that loss will ever be resolved. It's a uniquely painful form of suffering, which I was like, ooh, that's deep.
I know. I actually did listen to one of her, like an interview of hers.
Really?
Yes.
I don't even know what this lady looks like.
No, because I remember almost like not fighting with you on it, but I guess definitely struggling with you on it and understanding it. And I kind of like said in my mind what I thought it was and like went on my merry way.
Yeah.
And then as filming got closer, I was like, you want to know what? Let me just like listen to someone on it. And one of the first things I came across was Pauline Boss and an episode on her and all that stuff.
Yes, because I feel like our conversation on grief is structured around like loss, because that was what bonded us, what got us here, and what we mostly talk about, which is, I guess in a way, niche. Like not everyone has experienced a loss. They eventually will in preparation of it, which kind of falls under ambiguous grief, which we'll get into. But I feel like everyone that can relate to like maybe a job loss or a relationship that didn't go well or something like that. But I do have 2 types of ambiguous grief to get into. So the first one is a physical absence, but still in your thoughts. Examples of that is like a soldier missing in action, a child who runs away or has been abducted, a loved one whose body was never recovered, someone who goes to jail, they're incarcerated, if you ever had a divorce, a child moving to college, infertility sometimes, abortion, if you quit, quiet quitting I put on there. I was like, quit? What's that? But yeah, like quiet quitting, which was like this term that was developed recently. And then the second type is physically present but emotionally absent, which I feel like some people have experienced. So examples might include a loved one who's living with Alzheimer's or a traumatic brain injury, or a parent or sibling or partner who has fallen into the grips of like addiction or like a mental health situation. And the reason why I was so excited to kind of like make this pivot is because I learned about this fairly recently, or I think I knew what it was, but didn't have like words for it or more of a definition. Yeah. So I feel like most of us probably felt this hard in 2020.
Yes.
Where like we might have had trips planned or different things that we wanted to do. And because the world stopped, we weren't, afforded that opportunity. So I've mentioned this event in the past, but I wanted to go in like details on this episode. So I attended this event last year, November 11th, and it was called We Go on Tour, and that's also their Instagram. And someone by the name of John O, I believe, curated it. It is 3 people like tagged at the top, but I felt like this was his baby, and maybe other people kind of assisted. And it's kind of hard to describe the event, but I'll do my best. Also, shout out to my friend Lindsay, who is my old neighbor in Philly, and my good friend and sister Caress, because they both saw this event and tagged me in it and DM'd me. And I was like, what is this? And I remember bringing it to you and Miguel and was like, I don't know what it is, but maybe we should go, like, whatever. So I went in thinking, like, one thing, like, this guy is probably just a phenomenal speaker. He'll probably speak on his own loss, maybe some Q&A, and, like, we'll move on. But no, this was a fully curated event. John O, did share his story about loss. He had lost his brother. There was also another guy who spoke. I cannot remember if he lost his son. I think that's what he lost, his son. There was also a rapper there who had lost his mom to cancer. And in between the different acts, they would have a comedian that kept the like show flowing. And I'm like, who can make jokes about being dead? But, like, he really did make things really funny. And then at the end, it was a panel of some people who didn't come out and do their own, like, monologue, which I think was great. And I don't want to spill too much because I have no idea how much of this is supposed to be, like, a secret, under wraps, and, like, if they're continuing this.
Understand, yeah.
Yeah, but he had mentioned while he was up there speaking about this, like, ambiguous grief. And I think at one point, people had raised their hand, like, who's experiencing that. And I felt like the majority of the people who attended, and this was in New York, was experiencing ambiguous grief. And I was like, oh, whole time I thought everybody was here because somebody in their life had died. Passed. Yeah. But I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And, like, I'm really happy to kind of take a deeper dive and, like, break out segments about this and talk with you about it.
No, I remember you because I do remember you inviting, like, us and our producer and everything like that. And I remember originally, because we love getting tags from events. So if you guys see any grief events, let us know.
Yes.
But we were also excited because we're like, we found a grief community, and you're like, this could be an amazing networking opportunity so we can discuss grief with other people.
Yeah.
And I would say it was maybe a week later, you came back and you're like, I didn't get to network, but you were just like, this is going to be amazing for this show. Like, learning about ambiguous grief, learning about everything that I guess they brought to you. I felt like I could feel your excitement through the text messages. So, yeah, I love how it went from, like, something where you're hoping to, like, kind of get more into the community, but you came out learning so much from it.
Yeah. And I think they just did a really nice job of, like, I think me and you also, when we sit here, we want to be able to talk about a topic that's very serious and can be emotional, but we also want to bring, like, a little bit of lightness to it. Like, we don't want to come off as a Wednesday Addams or, like, a dark side.
Yeah.
We just want to be, like, even tone. But I feel like the graphics, the way it flowed, it just was so thoughtful that I felt like I was just, like, full after I left. And I was like, I want everyone to go to this.
No, like, I remember you're like,
I'm like, this should keep going. Like, why is this not being produced by, like, Issa Rae? Like, why is this not, like, more mainstream or something? Because I think it was just so informative and just, like, a very, like, full circle and, like, rounded event.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah, so I was really happy to bring it here and, like, do what we did with the 5 stages to kind of, like, break it out. But do you have any examples or experiences in your life where you feel like, oh, this was ambiguous grief and I didn't have the word for it then? Or
maybe I remember when you frost, like, I feel like I could grasp the concept of it. Like, I get it. Like, loss hurts, but I was just like, it really hurts as much as, like, a full on, like, death. And I feel like I couldn't completely get it, like, at all. Yeah. And then actually listening to what's her name? Pauline Boss, who was, like, I think, you said a theorist who kind of, like, really helped, like, get, like,
give a name
to ambiguous grief. She was saying that how closure is, like, not the best word to use, and that what we're really looking for is clarity, but clarity is almost impossible to find when it comes to ambiguous grief. And I feel like that was kind of eye-opening, because she's like, especially in American culture, we love clarity. We love to find cures for things. We love to know answers for things. Yeah. And just knowing my personality, like, when I can't fix something, I feel like that's when I tweak out a little bit. Like, I don't get what's going on right now. Yeah. So I feel like learning that ambiguous grief is so tied to, like, not being able to fix things and not having a certain amount of clarity on things, that's when I was like, okay, maybe that's why I didn't grasp this at first. So yeah, after hearing Boss's podcast and having her almost kind of say,
she has a podcast,
or she was interviewed on a podcast.
Oh,
that
okay,
I also can't remember the name of right now. And it's crazy because they were talking about pandemic grief and all that. So listening to it fully like thought out and like explained thoroughly, definitely helped. And knowing that she said it's hard for people because of clarity. I feel like made it a lot more relatable to me because I was just like, this isn't clear enough for me to understand. And you can't fix it. And like things should have answers. So I feel like hearing that kind of helped me gain perspective on ambiguous grief. And I still think I need to think a little bit harder of like how it affects me personally. So I don't have a great answer for you right now, but maybe by the end of the episode.
No, I think that's fair because the pandemic was something that the entire world had to experience. And even like people who had children had to explain to their kids why they couldn't go to school. Even that year, I feel bad for us 90s babies because we turned 30.
Oh my God,
and my birthday was in the thick of this pandemic and I had a trip planned. And I even feel like most people had to experience what that was, even if they didn't have a word for it, because therapy was like up that year. You could not get a therapist to save your life. Like they were like, I'm fully booked out. Like I remember like trying some different avenues and everyone was like, either this person isn't working or like you have to stick to your time. If you miss your therapy time, then it was like they couldn't book you out again. So I thought that was like the first time where I felt like everyone felt it and it was kind of on the spotlight. And then another thing when I was preparing for this episode, I thought about, I feel like I've heard this saying a lot and I feel like most people have, where like, if something bad happens to you and say you're like stressed or like crying or whatever, and someone goes like, well, did somebody die? I hate that because no one has to die for me to feel grief in a situation. Like it has to hit, you know what I mean? Like a breakup does hurt just as much as maybe as someone dying, or I'm sure losing a child or a child being abducted or not being able to graduate on time because you failed a class. Those are big monumental moments in people's lives. And I feel like the majority of society diminishes those feelings because no one died. But it's a death of a dream. It's a death of my future. It's a death of like my relaxation or the new person that I was going to become. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe we should develop some sort of like conversation, coping mechanisms, or like tips for people who are going through things.
It was interesting that she kind of said it is a more American thing to like almost diminish it. Because I think she had a sibling across the sea, and she's like, every time we go for a graduation reunion, they still honor my brother. Like it's still like a very present thing, and like keeping people present, like keeping loss present is a normal thing. Where I feel like here everyone is so quick to be like, it's over, like, get over it, like finish it.
Exactly. Or they feel like I guess the grieving period is supposed to be much shorter. Like, okay, well, like cry it out. And then even when I think about reality television shows about like when intervention was really big, I think it still comes on, or like 600-Pound Life, or even Hoarders, Buried Alive. And those people share their stories. Like sometimes they do say like, you know, my husband died or my sister or some traumatic event took place in their life. But sometimes that loss that took place is ambiguous.
No, I know. And I feel like I definitely can admit that I'd be like, all right, it's been a few years. You can get over this now. So I feel like learning how it can affect someone so deeply is something that I'm trying to figure out. Okay. And now, after you saying like, did someone die? And it feeling so harsh and like rough, I'm like, damn.
It does. Because it sounds like they're saying like, well, take it on the chin, or like suck it up, or like how always like I'm gonna thug it out. And like, okay, yes, I can thug things out, but like you also should allow yourself to grieve things that maybe someone didn't die. Like,
especially, I feel like all of last season, all we did was say, like, grief is not on a timeline. Like, don't put grief on a timeline, which I was the first one guilty of. I remember freaking out at my dad's, like, 1-year anniversary because I was telling my therapist, I'm like, I think I should be more ready for this. I think my whole life is going to change after this 1 year. And she's like, it's not. Like, grief is not on a timeline, and we shouldn't be pushing people, no matter what their loss is, to, like, end it and finish it and fix it, which is a hard concept in my mind.
But more in the, like, realms of coping, I was trying for this one to figure out, like, is there a specific way to encourage people that are experiencing this to like cope with. And I feel like it's aligned with a lot of the other kind of grief. Like if someone dies, like we always say there's no right or wrong way. And you're going to move forward and backwards and up, down, and left and right. So just give yourself time. I think also just to recognize your emotions. Like it's okay to not be okay. Like you can sit and stew in some shit, but as long as you like get yourself together. Yeah. So I know when people are like, I'm just having a bad day or I just feel this way. It's like, okay, that's cool. Like feel the feels, do what you need to do, but just be mindful that like, don't stay in it. You have the right to grieve whatever it is in life.
And I think we even mentioned that because whenever we start our episodes, we're like, hey, how are you? I remember you're like, I'm going to tell people how I really am.
Yeah.
But me on the other hand, I'm like, I'm just going to say I'm good.
Exactly. I'm like, no, I want to be honest. Like if it's not a good day or if I'm like, I don't want to accept this today or I'd rather be taking a nap or something.
So do you feel like you've recognized, like what are your ambiguous grief moments? Or
I have so many, which we'll like get into that I'll try to be transparent but with a filter about some experiences. But I think when I first heard it, I was like, wow. And I think the term of like, did someone die? Because I felt I always heard like, oh my gosh, like you're hard on yourself or like suck it up. And I'm like, that's not fair. Like people are going through things that mentally we don't know where they are, and I never want to feel like I'm pushing someone over the edge.
Yeah. Like, or I think it's another thing where everyone's coming with a story. Like if someone is mad at you for that one day, you don't know what they just came from to feel this way.
Yeah. And I think like even back to like intervention or like hoarders, like their stories have not always been death. It has been that I got a divorce, and because of the divorce my husband got custody of my kids. Like that in itself is mind-blowing. I've heard that divorces feel like death.
Yeah, because it's a huge loss of the community, like that you've been with.
So it's definitely a difference, and I'm glad that we can spotlight this and have a conversation about it. I love that it was something that was new to me that I was excited about, and something that you were like, I'm not sure, I'm having trouble comprehending it, and I can't wait to like recap it towards the other episodes where we go into a little bit more detail just to see where your mind is and how you feel about it.
Me too.
Today's episode is dedicated to Patricia Norma Williams McNair, aka Aunt Pat. Again, we're your bereavement babes, Leah and Rachel, and we'll see you on the other side.